Welcome to the Private Markets Update from ACEC. It's been a while since we've spoken with Erin McLaughlin, who is our guru when it comes to everything private markets and the economy at large. Erin, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
We talked last time. We mentioned some trends that were happening. It looks like there are kind of three trends and things to watch out for right now, and it seems that AE revenue is up, residential housing starts are still hot, and then we have a kind of a worrying trend relating to public spending. So let's kind of start at the top there. Where are we in the world of AE revenues right now?
Well, we're getting better. So that's the key message here. So one important data point that we track on behalf of the engineering industry is the Census Quarterly Services Survey. And so the part of that survey is that they track the NAICS code for our industry, both architectural and engineering. So this is a quarterly data point that's really important to us. And of course, last year, when the recession began it began at the very end of the first quarter, but we saw that decline in the second quarter of last year, came down about 10, 11%. And it has stayed at that decline of 10 and 11% second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter of last year. So just within the last couple of weeks, they have released the first quarter number, and we came up 4.3%. So with an estimated quarterly revenue for AE firms in the U.S. of $83.14 billion. So for us, this is just really, really interesting to look at because, we see things are opening up. We know we're in a consumer economy. We know people are getting vaccinated and money is starting to flow. But for us, we're not a consumer business. So, are things getting better for us? And this data point tells us that yes. And so, it was interesting to note that our dip of about 11% was flat through last year. And that first quarter, we already are seeing an improvement.
So that now brings us to the second point, because while we're not, in the services economy per se, we do have land development people, we have surveyors, we have people who are involved with the residential market. And
right.
That is something which I am just amazed by, the number.
It is amazing.
I mean, We're looking at an amazing amount of growth in that.
Yes.
We're 29% is the number that kind of stuck in my mind for growth.
Right. So the other data point that we track carefully is what's called construction put in place from Census, and HUD participates in that as well. And so on a monthly basis, there's that rolling number, and it includes both design and construction spending, where we compare month over month last year. So for the month of April, which is the most recent month we have data for, released earlier this month, we are up 29.7% in residential spending, April 2021 over April 20. That is just incredible. It's, I believe, the biggest year-over-year increase that we've seen in modern times. And, the residential market continues to boom. It started about the middle of last year, and it has just continued ever since.
Yeah, and it just, those are numbers which, coming out of a pandemic, coming out of a recession, this economic shutdown, seeing these numbers where it's like 29.7% is just insane. So, of course,
it is.
Yeah, that raises some fears at the same time. It's how much more can this grow?
Well, it does raise some fears, but there was an article actually this morning in the Wall Street Journal about the fact that we still have a housing shortage. So when you consider, and of course the word bubble has been mentioned, but most analysts do not think that we are in a bubble at this point. And there's a couple reasons for that. Namely, it's the size of that millennial generation, and that the value of the housing stock is still there. So, we're not heading into a financial crisis or anything like that that would sort of burst a bubble. And the fact is, we really have a very strong demand for housing due to the age of the millennial generation and them buying houses right now. And I think that the mix of housing and what making sure that we have affordable housing is, of course, top of mind for policymakers and others. But the actual demand for housing is certainly still there. And we have a lot of other economic constraints that have sort of hampered the housing market. One is sort of the availability and cost of land. So that is a really that's a big pressure point for our developer and home builder clients in certain metropolitan areas of the country. And then in other areas of the country where maybe they do have land, there's other pressure points like the cost of lumber and the cost of appliances, which actually seems to have almost overtaken the cost of lumber as one of the biggest concerns.
And it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, because it's across the economy, disruptions in the supply chain, and it just kind of shows again the interconnectedness of the economy when it comes to appliances, electronics, the chip shortage,
right?
Really, that try to find something that takes, Apple's having the issues. A lot of the consumer electronics people are having issues with no supply of raw materials to actually build the things people want to buy. But then, of course, we see this because we're getting ready to actually go into our annual report, and it's a printed document. And I'm talking to our publishers, and they're like, we have noticed that our mills are increasing prices because supply and demand. They don't have enough lumber. The lumber prices went up, and demand now, because people are coming back and wanting to print things, is having the effect of increasing price. So paper prices are going up, and everything associated with it. And what you and I talked, a couple months ago about one of the great trends in engineering is the wooden construction, that timber driven
mass timber. Yes.
So that it'll be interesting to see how that impacts that growth in the mass timber market, where you have these designs that are coming out, which are building substantial large buildings, vertical construction, with mass timber instead of steel and everything else.
That's a really dynamic change that will be interesting to watch. Lumber is certainly, we all know that that's used in most single family homes and a lot of apartment buildings, multifamily as well. There was a significant code change made this past winter, which allows for mass timber structures, I believe, to be built, up to 6 or 7 stories. Of course, that depends on other local codes and that sort of a thing. So it will be very interesting. Now, I also read in the Wall Street Journal this morning that some of the lumber surge in pricing is easing up. So like everything in this sort of pandemic and post-pandemic economy, there's a volatility to it. And so we are seeing changes happen quite frequently. So, and I know our members, they can be flexible with their clients, and we are being flexible with our clients. So, so we just have to continue to be that way until things sort of, until we enter our new normal, whatever that is.
It's being seen everywhere. I mean, it seems like it's a whiplash effect. There's an elasticity to it. It's weird. It gets better, and then it gets worse, and it gets better, and it gets worse, and it depends on what sector it is. I mean, you've heard enough people complain about Starbucks and going on to try to do mobile ordering and realizing half of their menu is unavailable because of supply chain issues. That's a microcosm of the larger supply chain in the economy, especially when everybody started moving to, on-demand inventory, or nothing on the shelves, and get everything down last minute, and then all of a sudden there's no inventory. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But the positive in residential is balanced out by, as it always is, with a reduction in public spending, which we have been seeing. And this is a trend to watch. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So for our regular followers, you may remember about last year around this time, we predicted that obviously the private markets were sort of going to fall faster than the public markets, and I was very relieved to see that the public markets actually stayed flat or came up a little bit when you looked at year over year changes from 2020 to 2019. So, in a chart that I showed recently, that you saw, Jeff, and other ACEC leaders saw, between June of last year, after the pandemic had begun, in January, public spending year over year was up about 3 to 4% almost every month. There was one month in September when it went down a little bit, but it went up and up. But now, for this past year, February, March, and April, public spending has been down every month year over year. So, what that really tells us is that the lack of tax collection over the course of the pandemic has now caught up to our public clients in those public agencies. So, it just took longer for them to feel the pain and to rein in their spending as a result. So, after 3 months of something, can we call it a trend? Maybe. I'll be very curious to see next month and the month after if we continue to see that year over year public decline. I think that what we do at ACEC, advocating for infrastructure spending and advocating for that design and construction spending, and the passage of the CARES Act, continuation of the surface transportation, and hopefully an infrastructure package will hopefully negate that trend. But right now we are seeing what is a 3-month decline in public spending on design and construction.
It's a good signal to lawmakers, because that one upside risk, probably the number one upside risk, is still infrastructure and action on a robust federal infrastructure package that could really turn the tide on what could be a trend and could just turn it back.
Right. Yeah. So I think what you're referring to is so the National Association for Business Economics, of which ACEC is a member, is a great group here in DC, and they have a panel of 49 forecasters that they survey quarterly, and it's always and these are folks from all different industries, Wall Street, different trade associations, etc. And when they ask them, what is the greatest upside risk to the U.S. economy? What can make the most difference in getting a positive outcome? Infrastructure spending is always on the list, but it's usually pretty far down in the top 5 or 10. Maybe 4% of the panel says infrastructure spending. However, this last panel that they put together in May, 21% of the forecasters said infrastructure spending would have the greatest effect on our economy. And what came in second was a large fiscal stimulus program, also at 21%, which could also be infrastructure, frankly. So I just think, that means that, people are believing, not just us in the AEC industry, but people, here in DC, economists, maybe even Wall Street, know that infrastructure spending will have the greatest impact, can have the greatest impact on our economy at this stage. It's no longer about containing the pandemic. This is the first time it's not just about let's contain that virus and let's watch our behavior. Now it's about how can we improve our economy.
That would be for Congress to act on a substantial multi-year infrastructure plan policy with predictive spending that the states can plan around, and they can start getting stuff onto the docket that our firms can then start designing and hiring construction people and getting out there and start building, because that will create the economic stimulus that we need to shore up any potential risks to the economy. And so that's another point to make with your lawmakers when you meet with them. That is still the number one upside risk that that business economists are seeing. So, Erin, in the time we have left, what else are you working on What else are we can we look forward to from your team?
Well, we are continuing to analyze our 4 private market sectors. We're adding a 5th market, and we'll be producing a report at the end of this summer on the education market. So, education market is not necessarily private because a lot of the largest educational clients are big public universities or big K through 12 school districts, but it's become such a sizable market. It's actually larger than the office building market when you consider the entire US. And that was a data point that I did not know. So when I came across that data point, I just thought, what an opportunity for us to start analyzing and conveying on the education market from K through higher education and taking a look at that. So we're going to start doing analysis on that, and we'll see that at the end of the summer. The other thing that I think folks will find very interesting is in the summer issue of Private Side, our column in Engineering Inc. magazine, I talk about all of the alternative data sources that folks look at with regards to our economy. And that's everything from the open table metric, are people returning to restaurants? It's also really interesting, especially for us, because we're so invested in how people use land and use infrastructure, is, understanding how people are searching for directions on their phone. So economists even use that nowadays to say, are people getting back on transit? Are people driving to work? And so I encourage folks to check out the column because we have some interesting data points, and anyone can look at those data points. So if you're a nerd like me and you want to know, we've also included some links to check out those alternative data points.
It's great that you're looking at all these different kind of tertiary inputs to analyzing economic activity, because it's become so much more than just simple supply, demand, and jobs numbers. It's how are people actually interfering with the economy to tell you what's happening.
Right. And how is human behavior going to change the way that we use infrastructure and land? And I think coming out of this pandemic, understanding how we go to work, how many days we go to work, how people learn, where people eat, all of those things really do inform how we design our built environment. So, so we could be in the midst of an unprecedented change that we're sort of figuring it out as we go.
Right there with everyone else, just trying to figure out exactly what this is. If it's an actual historic, and not that it hasn't happened before. Let's go back to this. It's not like anything changed after the Spanish flu, right? It's not like there wasn't any massive change then. It just kind of set up the remainder of the 20th century. This could be one of those.
Right. But we didn't have iPhones and Zoom after the Spanish flu. So it could be also the collision of different trends that might change things.
You have a lot of work to do. Let me tell you. You have a lot of stuff. You have a lot of analysis. And Erin's been doing a fantastic job of bringing all that analysis to our members. So I really do encourage you to take a look at our private markets briefs, available up on acec.org. Read the Private Side column in Engineering Inc. and stay tuned to these podcasts. The Private Markets Update. We'll make sure to have these on a regular basis so that when new trends come out and new data is out there, but Erin can come and discuss what it means for our industry. So, Erin, thank you so much for taking the time.
Great. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, and this has been the Private Markets Update. Take care, and we'll see you next time.